Motion number 1, motion du gouvernement numéro 1.
On debate, l'honorable Senator.
The Honourable Senator Odette.
Kwe, Segon, Wachia, hey, good day, bonjour. Chers collègues, Tchubohogade Ketinois Nujewan. C'est avec honneur, fébrilité.
I am honored, excited, and I must admit, nervous as I rise today to deliver my maiden speech in response to the speech from the throne. First of all, I would like to acknowledge and, of course, thank the Anishinaabe Nation for welcoming me onto their territory and allowing me to continue my journey. I would like to thank each and every person as well who has helped in any way to make my dream to become a senator, which I have had since I was young, come true. A dream then nourished by rage and anger to change discriminatory laws has now become a reality. I pledge to give a resonating voice to those who did not have one and help build a vibrant Canada. I will not be able to name each and every person who has significantly helped me make my dream come true, but know that I hold you dear in my heart and I thank you sincerely. I would also like to commend my parents, Mom and Dad, for their patience. You're using up my time. And also for your love and unwavering support. You have always supported me. My mother, Eveline, is a great Innu woman, although she's very small. And my father, Gilles, is the most handsome Quebecer there is. According to some First Peoples stories, I was a little bright light in the sky when I chose my parents, and I could not have chosen better. My arrival in the land of the Atik, the Caribou, was not without its setbacks. I was born in Labrador after stopping a train on its way from Sept-Îles to Schefferville. In the middle of this vast territory, my mother had to be evacuated by helicopter to Labrador City, proving at this point that I would be a nuisance even before my first breath. In fact, early in life, in that train, I faced segregation because until 1989, Indigenous people were assigned to the Savages train cart. You heard me. There were cars for whites and cars for savages, your words used at the time. The pine cone does not fall far from the spruce tree. I joined the ranks of Quebec Native women as president in 1998, continuing the legacy of my mother, Eveline, to stand up for the interests of First Nations women. My mother was one of the co-founders of Quebec Native Women. She and her fellow gentle warriors joined together to defend their rights, stolen by discriminatory laws, and to work to improve the living conditions of women and their families. So on one side, segregation, and on the other side, I was blamed for being half Quebecois. Why did I have to choose? Why not embrace both my Innu and Quebec identity? Why not thrive using this mixed background bestowed on me? As Samyen, an Anishinaabe artist, says so well, and I strongly encourage you to listen to his music, he said, as a mixed child in a divided world, I did not choose my side. I chose to weave them together. End quote. As a beader, I would say I chose to bead them together. Beading is a source of healing for me. Each bead corresponds to a bright light and has a soul of its own. Today, I will place beads on your path, and I strongly hope that you'll know how to pick them up. And together, we'll be able to assemble them, bead them, that is, and work toward creating a fair and equitable society where everyone is valued for their diversity, language, culture, values, and history. during my swearing-in ceremony on November 22nd, and that day is forever engraved in my mind, I stood before you proudly wearing my Innu moccasins so that they could keep me grounded, so that they could connect me with Mother Earth and remind me of where I came from. I also wore a ribbon skirt given to me by my daughter-in-law for a march in honor of the late warrior Joyce Echequin. This skirt carries my duty to remember. I also wore a beaded medallion to honor the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls carried away by giants. Anukum, as well, wears the Senate pin as a sign of collaboration, openness, and change, and allows the voices of marginalized and vulnerable people to be heard and to resonate from coast to coast. My medallion represents my core priorities, that is, self-determination, justice, and education. It was imperative for me to arrive here in this chamber with my symbols, which are as important to me as those found here in this chamber. They are a way for me to redefine our relationship. This relationship is based on knowledge, recognition, reparations, and reconciliation. Or repair, rather, and reconciliation. A growing awakening has manifested itself with the confirmations of unmarked graves. This was news that for the first time hit the imagination of people. Well, this truth has nonetheless been testified many times, too many times. I would like to praise the courage of the 10,500 and more First Peoples who shared their truths and allowed them to be translated into calls for justice, calls to action, and recommendation. 3 inquiries, indeed, were conducted between 1991 and today that I will name: the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. They resulted in extensive reports with nearly 10,000 pages of content and nearly 1,000 recommendations, calls to action, and calls for justice. I'm sure you'll agree, from where I stand, we are no longer at the recommendation stage. We're at the legal imperative stage, the accountability stage. What are the mechanisms for monitoring implementation? Where is the progress? We have a responsibility, then, to honor the truths of family members and survivors, and to ensure that human rights, rights to health, education, culture, security, justice, and so on, are respected. I therefore make it a point to remind parliamentarians of the importance of implementing and following up on the calls for justice. While they are all important, I believe it's essential to first build on the accountability and transparency mechanism in Call for Justice 1.7, calling for the creation of a national Indigenous and human rights ombudsperson with authority over all areas of jurisdiction. Reconciliation is on practically everyone's lips. In the chamber, we hear about the importance of First Peoples, founding languages, and reconciliation. However, Canadian history begins with the great explorers, their colonial languages that we call official languages, and bills that perpetuate prejudice. And when the federal government takes major steps in its relationship with First Nations governments, we still have to deal with challenges in some areas, for example, in Quebec. We're at the start of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. Our languages are part of the richness, the cultural fabric, and the identity of this great country. Our languages, in my book, are official languages of Canada. And as thousands of people including the Inuit of Nunavut, also feel, I'm proud that an Inuk woman, Her Excellency Mary May Simon, has reached the highest position in Canada. As Poktutuit says,
especially inspiring for our youth. It is also a meaningful step on the journey of reconciliation with Inuit. It also removes stereotype held towards Indigenous women by mainstream society. Alors,
we've proven that First Peoples are resilient. And we are alive and proud. We've always been a welcoming people. In fact, we invited your ancestors to come down from their boats. Quebec, 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 Quebec. Come down from your boats is what we were saying. And this should be taught in all schools. Education must play a major role in putting an end to ignorance, unconscious bias, racism, and discrimination. The importance of the Joyce Principles, named in memory of the late Joyce Echaquan, Sweetwater and Atakamek mother, and for who I committed to walk alongside Carol, her spouse, Diane and Michelle, her mom and dad. I cannot understand how in 2020, 100% of medical students would routinely diagnose a patient as having drug or alcohol intoxication if a 45-year-old First Nations man staggered into the emergency room with vomit on his shirt. And I am sure that these students are not racist, but the education that they receive or the lack of information regarding First Nations can create unconscious biases. Institutions are, of course, making progress in decolonizing content and moving towards reconciliation. In spite of everything, and in support of First Peoples' first self-determination, I dream of a university led by and for First Peoples in Quebec, and perhaps elsewhere, why not? Based on their languages, based on our languages, values, culture, history, traditions, knowledge and teachings. When you develop or when you draft or study a bill, I invite you, dear colleagues, to systematically ask yourselves about the impact of them on First Peoples. Let's ask ourselves if First Peoples have been involved in the process. Let's invite them from the outset of our studies. And I reiterate that I will make it my duty to ask you these questions. That's one of my responsibilities. Before closing, I want to tell you a little secret, perhaps a big secret. Some have already heard this. When I arrived here in the Senate, it was important for me to find the East Bloc. Why? Well, I'll tell you. I wanted to meet John A. MacDonald, or at least his spirit. I really wanted to see him. And I found him. I was trembling. I had tears in my eyes. I looked at his portrait, and I stood with my head held high. I put my hands on that photo frame, and I said to him, all that had been done to assimilate and destroy us did not work. I am still standing. We are still alive. We are still standing. I told him that in spite of everything, I agreed to work for an institution that was responsible for these assimilatory and destructive laws. I'm doing so because I truly believe, when I listen to you, when I look at you, when I hear you, when I watch you, that this institution is made up of human beings with an incredible individual and collective intelligence. And I'm sure that here in this wonderful chamber, we are going to be working for the well-being of our society in a quest for fairness, equality, justice, and social justice. I even told Mr. McToldham that I was ready to perhaps forgive him if he helped me write a new, completely different chapter. And time will tell. I want to chase away this idea that my mother has of feeling like a stranger in her own land, robbed. She extends her hand to you. She is her neighbor. She wants to be known.
Senator Scadier.